I've been testing the new SVBONY SC715C Planetary Camera, and before I tell you about it, here are a couple of pictures and videos and time lapses that I have made with this camera. In the box, it comes with the camera, a manual, an M42 to M42 female adapter, CS adapters, as well as an M42 to 1.25 inch adapter, and an SD4 and USB 3 cable. One thing to note is that since this camera can also be used for infrared imaging, you will need a UV IR cut filter of some sort for any sort of planetary or lunar or solar imaging. And I'll put a link to one of them in the description of this video as well. The general rule for planetary imaging is to use a focal ratio that is 7 times your camera's pixel size for very good seeing and 5 times your camera's pixel size for good or average seeing. And this will allow you to get the most out of your optics on any telescope. So that means that for a regular planetary camera with 2.9 micron pixels, you'll have to be at a focal ratio of f20 in very good seeing and roughly f14.5 in good or average seeing. Let's say you're using a standard Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, which is probably the most popular design used for planetary imaging. Since it has a focal ratio of f10, you will already be at f10 with this camera without any Barlow, and that'll be perfectly suitable for very good seeing. If the seeing is only good or not very good, then I simply select the bin 2 option in whatever software I'm using to capture the data, whether it's SharpCap or FireCapture, and once again I'm at the correct sampling. One pleasant surprise was that I did not notice any Newton rings, which is something that you often see if your camera's sensor is not perfectly aligned to the body of the camera, and I've seen that in just about every other camera I have used in the past except for this one. So it could just be a combination of the pixel size or the focal ratio I was using, but I did not notice any issue with Newton rings, and I wasn't using some super expensive telescope either. I was using a regular 90mm achromatic SVBONY refractor, which I had purchased just for solar imaging, and it worked very well. I was not using a tilter or anything else in capturing any of these solar time lapses. For any planetary, lunar or solar camera, one of the things that is very important is how many frames per second it can capture, or rather the speed of the camera. So I've connected this camera to SharpCap to test the speed of the camera. Now SVBONY says that it can capture 45 frames per second at the full 4K resolution, which is very impressive. So let's see if it can actually do that. For planetary or lunar or solar imaging, normally you'll use RAW 8 as the color space. Binning is set to 1:1. And capture area is set to maximum, which is 3840 by 2160 or 4K. And now to make sure I'm getting the maximum frames per second, I'm just going to select a very fast shutter speed, something like 1/500th of a second. And then down here, just make sure that USB speed is set to maximum. And that is all we need to set. Now let's take a look at what speed we're getting. If you look down here where my mouse is near the bottom of the program, it shows 45 frames per second. And just since I plugged the camera in, I've already gotten 4600 frames. So this is a very fast camera. And 45 frames per second at 4K resolution is very impressive. But if you're imaging something small, let's say a planet or a prominence on the edge of the sun, and you don't need the entire frame, you don't need a 4K size, you can actually select something smaller, like let's say 1920 by 1080 pixels. So that'll crop down to just the center of the frame. And here you can see a representation. This big gray frame is the full 4K frame. I've selected 1920 by 1080, which is full HD, which is just the center part of the frame. So now it only crops down to that center part of the frame. So I'll get a smaller field of view, but I'll get a faster frame rate. So if you look down here, now it's able to capture 87 frames per second at 1080p resolution. If I'm imaging Jupiter or Mars or any of the planets, I often drop down to 800 by 600 region of interest, just because I don't need a huge black region around my little planet. So if I drop down to 800 by 600, I'm getting 148 frames per second, which is perfect for planetary imaging or if you're imaging anything small. And we'll drop down once more just for fun. I normally don't image at these resolutions, but if I do drop down to, let's say, 320 by 240, you can get over 300 frames per second. But again, that's, if you're imaging Mars, maybe that might be useful because Mars will take up maybe, a third of the screen or something at this resolution. But I normally stick to about 800 by 600 when I'm imaging the planets. So they'll be visible pretty well down here. And if I'm imaging the sun or the moon, since this camera is very, very fast, I might stick to the full 3840 by 2160. And then if the seeing is bad, I'll simply switch to bin 2 by 2. And that'll end up decreasing the full size of the image, but still giving me good resolution. So one thing I noticed was that under DBaer preview here, some of my programs that I was using for capturing the data or processing the data were selecting the incorrect Bayer pattern. So I was not getting the correct colors. So they were selecting GRGB, but you want to make sure you manually select GBRG. This one over here, and if you select that, you'll get the correct color. Otherwise, you might notice a greenish tinge in your image. So DBaer preview, use GBRG. And if you are taking some deep sky images, make sure you also select that Bayer pattern. Let's say I go to weighted batch preprocessing or whatever program I'm opening my images in to do the stacking. Make sure you click on them and select the correct Bayer pattern, which is GBRG, instead of the GRGB that it was automatically selecting. So that's just a little thing. Only if you notice any issues with the colors, just select that correct Bayer pattern. So you can see up here, I have got almost 4,000 frames, which I think should be plenty. I'll stop that capture. Now, let's go towards the edge of the moon, the terminator, where the craters are most visible. As you can see, the seeing today is not phenomenal, so to say the least. But this is a very interesting area of the moon. And right now I'm taking 10-second exposures every 10 seconds. So here is my run that I'm doing right now. So let's see how this time lapse turns out. Okay, let's take a look at some of the final data and see how it turned out. So this was a video of one of those solar prominences that was coming off the edge of the sun, and this is real time. This is actually what it looked like on the screen at the time, or what it would have looked like through the eyepiece. And this prominence was moving so fast that I could almost see the changes in real time. And now here is the edge of the sun. There was an entire group of prominences leaping off the edge of the sun at the time, and this was also with my 90mm refractor and the SVBONY SC715C camera. Here is another view of that same large group of prominences. Here was one near the bottom left edge of the sun at the time, and near the bottom of the sun there was another one. This is quite massive. And on the solar surface, I could also see these large streams of gas. So these are, I guess, like prominences, but they're more near the center of the sun rather than the edge. So we're looking at them basically straight down. And here was one image of the Earth that I had put next to one of those large prominences, just to give you an idea of the scale. Now let's take a look at some of the videos I had captured using the time-lapse option. And here you can see that massive prominence growing and falling back down. And this was over a period of roughly 15 minutes. So this was an absolutely massive, very, very fast moving one. And this was another one of those leaping off the edge of the sun with the Earth for scale. Here's another view of the same one, and you can see a lot of dynamic activity on the solar surface, and at the same time you'll notice there is a distinct lack of any Newton rings, which is an issue I've always suffered with in the past, unless I was using a tilt adjuster. But in this case I see no Newton rings, and I did not use any flats or any other kind of calibration frames here. This is just how it turned out. And then I did get some data on the moon as well. So let's take a look at some of that. Here we go. That is the Alpine Valley and some of the mountains over here. The crater Copernicus, you can see a lot of detail in the walls of the crater. And again, same thing over here. And again, all of these shots were with the SVBONY SC715 camera and my big 16-inch Dob and my C11 in some cases. Again, another view. And that is the straight wall on the moon. You can see that really long line, and we're looking at that straight down. Okay, another view of the crater Plato and the Alpine Valley. Another view of the same. Okay, here we go. That is the crater Tycho. And since the seeing was pretty decent over here in these images, I was using bin 1 mode, which is 4K resolution. But then the seeing got worse, so I switched over to bin 2 mode. And over here you can see the image looks half the size, so this is full HD 1920 by 1080 instead of 4K. And if the seeing is not very good, you can drop down to 1080p mode to save some space, since you're not getting any extra resolution by shooting in 4K. So in 1080p mode, this camera has pixels that are effectively 2.9 microns across, which is the same as most normal planetary cameras. And then I did try my hand at some planetary imaging as well. The planets are a little too low in the sky from my location once it gets dark outside. But I did quickly run some tests, and this was with my C11 at f10, and that's the planet Jupiter. Now, it doesn't look great in this picture, but you can definitely see all the bands there, and I was able to capture the great red spot as well in another one of these images. But yeah, not really planetary imaging season for me from my location right now, but you can see it can do a great job. And this was the planet Mars. You can see the polar ice cap, as well as I think that is Syrtis Major. And then I tried my hand at some deep sky imaging. This is not a deep sky camera. For that, I would recommend one of the cooled camera options with a larger sensor. But just for fun, I imaged Messier 51, the Whirlpool Galaxy. And this is a total of actually only 4 images of 5 minutes each. So a total of 20 minutes of data. And this is after some processing. Here is what the unprocessed image looked like on the left. So if I got a couple of hours of data, I could probably get a good picture. But again, I don't really recommend using a planetary camera for deep sky imaging. That's all the data that I captured. And I think it did a phenomenal job. I mean, just looking at the amount of detail down here with just a little 90mm refractor, I was very happy with how clean the images are and how little noise there is in the images. Because of its speed, versatility, and excellent performance, I think this will likely be my primary planetary camera for now, and I think I'll definitely continue using it for solar imaging because of the lack of Newton rings. So overall, if you're looking for a planetary, solar, or lunar camera, I would definitely recommend this without any reservations. And if you're thinking of buying one of these, be sure to use the links in the description of this video, as that helps out this channel at absolutely no cost to you. Thanks again for watching, and clear skies.